in the whole big scheme of it, it came out that my son was a heroin IV user at the age of 17. And
Oh,
unbeknownst to me, I didn't find that out till in his 20s.
I am so super excited because here's the deal. Addiction just sucks. I don't know how else to put it, but most of us have all been impacted by some shape or form by addiction. So it messes with not just the person struggling, but everyone around them. And if you've ever felt lost, hopeless while trying to help a loved one, today's guest, Donna Marston, is here for you. Donna's a pro at guiding families through the tough stuff. As a certified recovery support worker, parent, coach, and founder of Sharing Without Shame, she's helped countless parents find hope and rebuild their lives. With over 26 years of experience, she just knows. So let's welcome Donna Marston. So, Donna, we had some questions kind of around like feeling lost, setting boundaries without guilt, hanging on to hope when hope is fleeting, healing the whole family, and some of the lessons that you've learned from your heart. So, let's go. How did
Let's go.
tell us? So, with the wisdom we had just, that you've gained
Mhm.
from on addiction, it was a personal lesson that you learned.
Yes.
And um can you tell us about that and how that came about and your journey there?
Yeah, so it was a long, painful journey. And so when my son, this is my oldest child, when he was 15, a mother's gut tells you something's off. And I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out what it was. And he was getting, as he's getting older, he's getting a little bit more distant and a little disheveled. And I would ask him, what's going on? Did somebody hurt you? Did somebody touch you? Like, what's going on? Because you're different. He was irritable, restless, and discontent.
And this is
And
where I think your people will say, "Oh, they're just teenagers. That's just the way teenagers are."
and
And
that's
it
what I
doesn't
thought.
they don't have to be.
Right.
Right.
I thought, well, it's probably just growing pains. You're making more of it than it is. Just let him be. And as he started to get older, found out he was bullied. So he asked to go to a private school. And so we did that. I mean, we'd work Saturday nights in the kitchen to help fund that cost. And he was arrested at 18, and it's like out of control behavior. It's a
What was
story.
he arrested for?
Radical driving, but
Okay.
come to find out, in his sobriety, I found out he was under the influence. He was huffing at the time,
What's
and
huffing?
um, it's a way of inhaling drugs.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
okay.
like with
So I was like, erratic driving, I'm thinking alcohol, but no.
no,
So
with
under
like
the influence.
spray paints.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
stuff like that. If you ever like sometimes you don't see it so much, but you used to see people with like paint around their mouth. It's because they were huffing. Um,
Oh, goodness.
and
How old is
and
your son now?
he just turned 42 today.
Yay! Happy birthday, son. How
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. And so it just started to snowball. It built and built and built. And so from 15 to age 20, I suspected something was off, but I didn't know. At age 20, he admitted to he had a problem with OxyContin. And so I thought he was, orally taking them. I didn't understand that you crush and sniff them, snort them. And
And that's
um,
a painkiller. That's a number, right? It numbs you.
yeah. And so, in the truth, in the whole big scheme of it, it came out that my son was a heroin IV user at the age of 17. And
Oh,
unbeknownst to me, I didn't find that out till in his 20s. And by the grace of God, on Mother's Day in 2008, my son finally found his recovery.
oh,
And
wow.
so, all of those years, and especially those last 5 years, I was in the fetal position. It's for the first 6 months when I really knew my son was sick and suffering. I went to bed when nobody was home, and I was in the fetal position with a broken heart. And there were days I thought, if I don't end up in a psych ward, this is gonna break me and kill me. I'm just gonna die from it.
Was it the feeling of like guilt, regret, hopeless? Like what did I, how much of that were you taking on as your responsibility?
Well, it's very normal to, the what ifs, the could haves, and the should haves that keep
Right.
us in bed and they keep us sick. Um, and so I would have those. And then I remember having a day, it was probably 6 months into being in bed, and that I realized, wait a minute, this isn't your fault. I didn't crush oxy so he could snort them. I didn't inject heroin into his veins. I didn't do this. I'm a good mom. I was loving and kind, and I took my job seriously. And in that pivotal moment, I was able to free myself. However, also in that moment, I realized I had a secret, because back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, you didn't talk about loving someone in active addiction in your family because
Right.
you were blackballed, right? There was a lot of shame that went with it. Now it can be much more open about it and it's much more accepted. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's it's a horrible, horrible journey, and it brought me to my knees. But I've taken what was my pain and made it my purpose, or
I love that.
message, and I became an advocate for the state of New Hampshire. And I'm usually kind of shy, but when I found my voice and my passion, so there was gifts that came out of this horrible time of his and my life.
Yeah. I want to go back because I know, like, I've seen like parents who are in it, right? So when their kids are 15, 16, 17, and they're in that age, right?
Yeah.
And that mother's gut that says something is not sitting right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring it up with other people, or you bring it up with, and everybody's like, oh, it's just teenage angst, teenage. How does a mom, like, how can a mom approach that in a way to, or is there just nothing we can do and we just do the best we can? Like, how can we intervene? Is it even possible?
It's like walking on a tightrope, because especially when you have a teenage child in active addiction, because they can't imagine the rest of their life not partying with their friends. That's what it kind of comes down to for them, right?
Because that's their social, if they quit that, then they're not in that social group. And I've got three children, 26, 18, and 14. And what I discovered is like that it's interesting. Like the 26-year-old class group was so different than the 25-year-olds and the 24. My 18-year-old, the group that came before him, were so different than the group that came before. I don't know what was in the water that year. Or
Well, the class that my son grew up in was the toughest class in the history of the school system where we lived at the time.
wow. So it's like a class,
Yeah.
and there's that feeling, and I like it's like, well, do you accuse your child of doing drugs who might not be doing drugs, or do you like bring it out to the forefront and they are, and then they lie to you? Like, what, like, how do you navigate that? I like, because I know that
Definitely.
in my age group, right? I'm 52, and I have a lot of folks who, 14, 18, 26. A lot of parents who are going through this
Yeah.
right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
as far as we know, they're not doing heavy drugs, but we don't know.
Well, if your child admits to, and I'll use alcohol, that they have like 5 beers at a night, it's probably double or triple. So my son told me it was cannabis, and actually it was heroin. Later, much later, in his sobriety, fentanyl, was just rampant and taking lives left and right.
Wow.
And I said to him one day, I'm so glad fentanyl wasn't around when you were,
Yeah.
an IV user active? And he said, oh, Mom, I loved fentanyl. Like, oh no. I mean, by the
Wow.
grace of God, he's still with us. And yeah, it's so it's a tricky slope to go on, because they don't want to tell us the truth, right? And they want to stay with their friends, especially teenagers. And
So
and
is there
and
anything we can do to help them? Like
I
help
for
them
me,
not go down that road. So there, I mean, I've heard two things. Like they're going to do what they're going to do. And the quicker they get there, like let them get there as fast as possible, because that they're just going to do what they're going to do. And then there's others who say, well, you can help them not have to go all the way down that road.
well, here's part of the problem. So most kids, junior high age, high school, junior high to high school, start to experiment with alcohol. They're vaping, and in vapes, there's oils that they can get high with, which is very prevalent with high school kids now. And I was at an event with the DEA, DEA for the state of New Hampshire, and people are overdosing on uh, vaping and also cannabis. It's laced. Um,
Unlaced cannabis.
yeah,
Okay.
it could be amphetamines, it can be fentanyl, it can be whatever.
Realize it, I guess. They're just not realizing that it's laced, or they
Right.
realize it's
But
laced, but
sometimes they do it,
they
and
just
it's
don't understand, like, they're pushing that envelope, and they've always been able to survive before, and it was okay
well,
before.
yeah, and they also said, your children are victims of fraud, because now the younger kids, high school kids, junior high kids have access to a computer. They're buying their drugs there. And so it looks like um, an Adderall or a Xanax. That's what it's stamped, but it's pure fentanyl. And so they're buying it, and it's being delivered to their homes. And there was a young lady in New Hampshire who bought a pill, or I don't know how many pills, off of the internet. The dealer brought it to her house, and she was nervous, so she thought it was a Adderall. Took half, and it was pure fentanyl. And she was valedictorian of her class. And in the morning, her parents found her dead.
Mm. Which
So
I think is a horrible business plan for that drug dealer, because I mean,
yeah,
you want to keep your clients alive. You want them coming back. If you kill them, they're not coming back. It's a
well,
horrible
as
business plan.
and that was brought up, like, you know, if they're killing their clients, how do they keep going? They said because if they losing 1,000, couple thousand people is nothing to
Mm,
the cartel, because there's millions more to tap into.
got it.
Yeah,
So like as a mother, how do you start this conversation
I think
with your teen?
it's planting seeds, but here's the problem. For some people, it's in their DNA, and I think that's my son was in his DNA. Because if you look back in your family histories, there's somewhere along the line, there's probably somebody. My husband's family was riddled.
Oh yeah,
So
we have addiction in my family.
yeah,
Definitely.
and so I'm gonna
It
the
goes with
way
the genius and the brilliance and the ADD. It goes along with so much other things.
yeah.
Yeah.
So imagine when we're all born with this baby cub in our gut, and it's
Hmm.
asleep. And as we grow, it becomes like a toddler tiger, it becomes a 4-year-old tiger, and then it becomes like a 12-year-old tiger. And then all of a sudden, I decide I'm gonna smoke a joint. And the first time I smoke a joint or take a sip, I mean, how many people give their little kids a sip of beer as toddlers
Hmm.
or, young children? And that wakes it up. That wakes the tiger up. So here's my beautiful boy, and here's his disease, which I call the tiger. And the more he smokes or ingests, they switch places. And so my son's lost in the bowels of his addiction. And every once in a while, I see my beautiful boy. But most of the time, I'm dealing with his addiction. And it's nasty and hateful.
So you're dealing with the tiger. They've traded places. That tiger used to be down deep, hidden, and then it traded places with your son
Yeah.
and with the addict, and
It's
now
vicious.
you're no longer dealing with the person, you're no longer dealing with your son, you're dealing with this tiger. That is such a great way to explain how that works, because it's so hard, because you're looking at your son, you're looking at the person you love, you raise, you adore, but he's not there. The addict is there. And
Right.
that's ah.
Yeah.
So they're gonna, so even if you bring it up, so there's almost like you bring it up, they're gonna lie to you. If they had 5 beers, double, triple that. If they said marijuana, it could be heroin. But that's not always the case. So parents, if your kid said, yeah, I took a hit of weed, doesn't mean that they're like going down that heroin
Right.
road. But
You'll know when
they're
they
not
are.
right.
You'll know
They
when they
don't
are.
tell you. They won't tell you. So what are some signs that in hindsight you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know, because I was with an addict. If you, especially if you've never done the fentanyl, the heroin, done anything like that,
Yeah.
those, you don't recognize the signs.
Right. So when my son was a teenager, middle of the day, he'd be nodding off and like drool's coming out of his mouth. He'd be sitting in the family room, and I'd be like, what's wrong with you? And oh, I'm just exhausted. Oh, okay. He became disheveled. Couldn't sleep at night. He was awake at night, but could sleep all day long. Didn't have an appetite. Would say he was going to be home at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and might not come home for a day or two.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
hmm yeah, that happened as he got older. Not so much when he lived at home and during high school, because it hadn't ramped up at that point. It ramped up in his 20s,
Got
where
it.
I could smell. He had this stench to him that was so gross, and it was just the heroin, the smell of the heroin just oozing out of his pores.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, and he just you your gut screams at you. You just know. You might not get them to admit it, but internally, as a mother or a father, because you know your children.
You know something's not right. So then what? So now something's
Mm,
not sitting, something's not right. They're young adults. We went from like their teens, and we just do the best we can. There's really not much we can do.
yeah.
Like, is that true? Like, I that because that is such a hard acceptance as a parent to say, to like move forward in faith. Like that's give it to God on a whole new level,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Um, I learned the hard way that I could not love my son into recovery.
Mm.
Let that just sit. Yeah. And I worked harder at his recovery than he did for a very long time. And so what happens is, and for me, when I hit my enough, I stopped unhealthy behaviors. When I hit my enough, I started to take care of me, and I started to figure out how I could do better, because what I realized as well was he is so sick. He's at this point he's in and out of treatment facilities.
Wait, can I go back? You said unhealthy, you had to stop your unhealthy behaviors and replace them with healthy behaviors. What are some examples of some unhealthy behaviors that you replaced with healthy behaviors?
While I was paying off his drug dealers. So I call what so I use kinder language. I don't label the person they have a substance use disorder. Their brains are wired differently than mine. Um, and I'm so tired of people shaming and blaming parents for loving their children by calling them codependent and enablers. So
Mm.
I choose the work I do, and when I work with the parents, we talk about unhealthy helping, and you'll see their shoulders drop, they'll relax, and like, oh, it's okay to.
Unhealthy helping.
Mm-hmm.
Some examples. Okay. Paying off their drug dealer. That is unhealthy helping. What are some other unhealthy helping that people might do that they might think they're helping, but it's actually unhealthy, not just to
Mm-hmm.
us as parents, but it's also unhealthy for the addict.
Yeah, so a lot of parents, so I ran family support for over 12 years in New Hampshire, and it blew my mind how many people did drug deals with their kids and thought it was safer for them to be doing the drugs at home. And unfortunately, some of those parents found their children blue in the morning. And
Oh,
so that's unhealthy helping, taking them to do a transaction and allowing it in your home. That's
okay.
healthy helping.
That's very unhealthy. What are some other examples of unhealthy helping?
Yeah, we would pay our son's car payment. He would overdraft his bank account. And because I was the best unhealthy helper. So we'd pay off his overdraft fees. He'd overdraft for a piece of gum, a thing of gum or a burger, and it would cost $35. So,
So financial. So basically we're just going to categorize financial. If we're helping them financially in any way, that seems like
unhealthy helping.
unhealthy helping. What are
Mhm.
some other examples of unhealthy helping outside of maybe financials that parents can find themselves falling into the trap of?
Allowing them to stay in their home when they're abusive to the other family members.
Mm,
Um, just allowing their bad behaviors, another thing of unhealthy helping is not allowing them to have the effects of the consequences of their addiction. So, in other words, and I do this whole thing in one of my workshops, and it's called the cycle of addiction. So, when my son started his addiction, he was restless, irritable, and discontent. And I could feel that, but I didn't know what it was. And so
right.
off he goes. And the more he uses, the more it becomes the obsession of the mind and the allergy of his body. And at this point, as I'm chasing him around a
Wait,
circle,
you said obsession of his mind and allergy
allergy of the body.
of the
Often what we're
body.
allergic to is what we crave.
Oh, okay.
I'm allergic to chocolate, but I love it.
I did not. Okay, I just learned something. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. I had to understand before you get too far forward. I needed to go back and understand. Okay, okay.
Yeah. And
Oh,
as the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind takes over, he's out on a run, on a spree. He's out. He might go missing for days, but that's his addiction is in control 100%. And as I'm going around this cycle with him, I'm
that's
chasing
the
him.
tiger. You're chasing the tiger.
Well, it's like a cat and mouse chase, right? I'm
But you're
chasing him.
thinking you're chasing your son. You're chasing the tiger.
Yeah, yeah. And so
Oh,
now I start to get really angry and I say stuff that I shouldn't say, but I say stuff in I'm going to level him and then I'll rise him back up. I'm going to just bring him to his knees so I can take control, right? And that didn't work out real good.
oh.
And then the natural consequences as we come back around, the natural consequences start. You get arrested, you go to jail, or you die. And as for my son, he got arrested. He's only spent one weekend in jail. I don't know how that happened because he used for a long time. And he would promise me the world, get me out of here. I'll go to treatment. I'll do anything you want. And so I want the best for my child. Sure, let's get you into treatment. And so he goes into treatment. And as I'm following him, he's 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 saying what I want to hear, right?
Mhm.
He's talking the talk, but I'm not sure if he's going to walk the walk. And at this point, I'm cautiously optimistic. And as soon as my son gets restless, irritable, and discontent, off he goes. And what I learned is I followed him and I chased him, and all the parents do the same thing. I had to get out of it. I had to
How
get.
did you get how did you get off that merry-go-round?
I saw. I a friend. I was a hairdresser at the time, and I probably wasn't doing real good. It was such a mess. And one of my clients said, "You ought to read this book by Esther and Jerry Hicks, Asking It Is Given. And it was like, I just can't. She goes, well, go to page, I want to say it's page
What's
32.
the title of the book? Asking is Giving?
Ask and It Is Given.
Ask and It Is Given. Okay.
And so I think it was page 32 was an emotional scale. And I was number 22. I was at the bottom. I was full of despair, grief, depression, you name it. And it hit me in the face because that's not who I am generally. And at that point, I believe that was the start of me hitting my enough. Because I don't like the word rock bottom because that can mean death. So when I work with parents, I teach them to say, hopefully when you reach your enough and when your loved one reaches their enough, they'll ask for help.
So, and I think I love the enough, and because we get to choose our enough, right? Our enough, I assume that he listed as like 1, 2, 3, and then it goes all the way like 32. While there's some,
22, yeah.
right? While there's some, their enough can be 5. Some others is enough 15. And I'm going to guess that a healthy enough is probably some not 32. We don't have to get to 32. So how can parents recognize that enough is enough and not have to go all the way to 32 without feeling the guilt, like they've given up too soon on their child?
And everybody's different. What worked for me may not work for anybody else. I keep myself between 1 and 7 because if I get to number 8, which is boredom, and this applies to a person with a substance use disorder, there's nothing saying that I'm not going to vibrate all the way down and start getting sick again. And so I use my emotional scale on a daily basis. And so when I was sick and suffering, I printed out, I put it on my desk, and I looked at it one day. This was how I started to heal. And I saw angry because some of the other stuff just wasn't resonated with me because I feel it energetically in my body. And I felt that. So I went and took a pillow and I beat the crap out of my bed. I just let out all this anger and this rage that I had. Like, how do you do this to my child?
I love this. You didn't like ignore the feeling. You chose to feel the feeling.
Yeah, well, I'm an empath. I'm very sensitive. So I feel feelings very deeply.
Mm.
Yeah. And
I understand empath, like a lot of times that comes from trauma in itself to have that, but we won't go down that road.
No, but I would like to state, I do believe in my heart that majority of the people who have a substance use disorder are empaths or empathic, and that's why they self-medicate.
They self-medicate. Yeah.
Because the pain is too much to bear. They don't know what to do with it. So they self-medicate. They put Band-Aid after Band-Aid all over themselves.
They haven't found out that's their coping mechanism.
Exactly.
And it's the easiest one. It's the one that's socially encouraged often as a teen, I see, because to get into those social circles, because you don't have, like some social circles, there's a qualifier. Right.
Yeah.
I had somebody tell me there's a qualifier. You have to be the smartest. You have to be the best athletic. You got to be the fastest, something. But if you're not none of those, the only qualifier you have to do is just do the drug. It doesn't matter your family background. It doesn't matter your values, your views, your choices, anything. As long as you do the drugs, then you're in that social circle.
And it's not about the drug. That's just the Band-Aid. Because they can't feel their pain. Right? So
you said, I love that. So you said 1 through 7 what is that 1 through, what is would you say the healthier?
It's joy. It's all good feelings, being joyous, being happy, being grateful, just really, really mindful, and just staying in a happy space.
And when you find yourself getting into, what are the negative, the vibrations examples that you're like, oh, when I start feeling that, I need to do some correction. I need a little course correction.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you get to 8, boredom, all bets are off that I'm not going to, vibrate down. So, you know, um,
That's
and
interesting that boredom is
the
the
gateway.
metric.
It's the
Yeah, is the gateway. Because what happens after boredom?
You start going down, you start spiraling into negative feelings and negative thoughts, and then you just keep going, because often you can't stop yourself till, I think of it like a bouncing ball, right? It's just like the top, and it just kind of keep bounces, and then it goes flat, like breaks, and there you are lying on the floor, a mess, an emotional mess.
Mm, goodness. So I'm just curious, when you hit boredom, what happens? Like, I think because I'm like, I'm bored, I'm going to go find something to do.
Hmm.
And I'm like, how does boredom get you to unhealthy? How is that the gateway to
You're in your head.
it's in your head? So is it because like we start thinking, what are we thinking when after boredom
Negative
that
thoughts start coming up,
okay.
right? And you start,
Uh,
oh, woe is me. I have a son addicted. Oh, I must be a lousy mother. Oh my goodness. Did I treat him differently than his brother? Did I love him enough? Like, what did I do wrong? And that just
mm,
brings me down, 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 down.
yeah. The
And then
what
you're
ifs.
depressed and so depressed. What happens with a lot of parents, and I always tell them, remember to breathe, pay attention, because I would catch myself holding my breath.
Yeah.
And that's what we do when we don't know what to do, or we're it's the fear, and that's one of the things under, after boredom, is fear controls us, and fear pushes us to be controlling.
And I love because when you're in fear, that's when you need control. If you're comfortable, you're willing to just let it go. Yeah, life's good. Just yeah, whatever. Everything's fine. But when you're afraid, that's when you're like, okay, what's going on here? Da-da-da, da-da. That makes so much sense. And I love how you talked about the first thing you mentioned was be aware of your breath. If you're
Mm.
holding it here or if you're like letting it go.
Or shallow breath.
Shallow, yeah. It's got to
Yeah.
be deep. And I'm guessing uh, we inhale, you take those deep breaths, that helps reset that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and just letting it flow, and that's how I started to get well, is through Reiki and meditation, and just
You do
allow.
Reiki. Tell us about Reiki. Expand on that.
Well, through this journey, I became a Shambhali Reiki master, because that saved my life.
So
I
tell us about it. Like I see though I need let's if someone is like they've never heard of this before, want to go look like tell us about the value of Reiki,
uh,
how we use it, some examples, like just take a few minutes and let's dive into that for just a second if that's okay. A few
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. So Reiki, it works on your energy field. So we have an energy field, and it's along our spine, and we have what they call chakras, and we have a crown chakra, our third eye, our throat, our heart, our solar plexus. I can't remember but there's one at the belly button, then there's one right around our private area, and that's for being grounded. And so when you feel like nothing's going wrong in your life, but you feel like, like, oh,
Right?
I just don't feel good, I have no energy, it's because your chakras are off. And so when you balance them, it gets everything spinning, and you get a little, uh, skip in your beat. It's like you kind of get jazzed up, and you feel happy. And so when I was so sick, someone told me, go get Reiki. I was like, I'm broke. I'm spending all this money for retreatments and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, listen, go find $50. You can do it. And I did. And this woman took me through this thing, and she said, you're you got to start with some self-love, some self-care. So she was one that could read your energy as well. And but when I left there, it was the first time I had smiled in years. My
Oh,
heart felt lighter. I felt like light, and I wanted more. And so I studied it and I became a Shambhali Reiki master. So I incorporate energy healing into when I work with my clients because, we're and I do it with ear therapy with beads or magnets, and you put it on pressure points and just to relax and zen out because we're so much in our heads. And my head was my
yeah.
help. My head told me stories that I didn't know to be true, but I believed them, and they got me sick.
Oh, your head was telling you stories that you knew weren't true, yet internally you believed them. Like
Mhm.
your mind said, that's not true, but your everything about your soul, your spirit, your energy, your vibration just said it believed it. Like it
Mhm.
became
Yeah.
it defined you allowed it to define you, even though you knew it wasn't truth. So
Hmm.
it's like the abuser was in your head.
Right. Yeah. That's why I say my head was my hell. I created it all by myself.
And then you learned to deconstruct it
Hmm.
and you got your energy straight. So during that shift from when you're the unhealthy helping, what does healthy is there such thing as healthy helping? It seems like
Yeah.
healthy helping might just be like just allowing them to go on their journey
That. And so healthy helping is setting boundaries, right, that are healthy,
and sticking to them.
that protects our hearts and our stuff and sticking to it. One of the things that if you have a teen or a younger child, or even if you have an adult child living at home, I do a living agreement with the parents I work with, and we do a three strikes you're out. And so an example would be, you can stay in this house and I'm going to do random drug tests. And if one of them comes out positive, then you have a choice. You can go to treatment, or I'm going to take the door off of your bedroom and you're going to lose your privacy. And you let that loved one make that decision, because then they can't blame you if anything goes wrong, or they shouldn't, but well, they will anyway. But
Right.
again, it's
That's
their
the same
choice.
you give the same options to your toddler when they're 2. And
Right.
their hormones are hitting and there's a chemical imbalance in their hormones and you just
Right.
let them make their choice. Oh, okay, I got this. What's the other thing that we do?
Yeah. You follow through you do, the agreements. Trying
What
to
are some
think.
other agreements that are healthy agreements,
Well, with this,
boundaries?
so we do three strikes, you're out. So say a test came back negative, then the door is going to go on your bedroom. And this is all explained up front, and it's a contract that they sign. And then if you know this happened a second time, the door goes back on, you get to sleep in the living room or go to treatment. You're going to lose completely all privacy. And the third strike is, we have a great little homeless shelter here in New Hampshire. You can go
Mhm.
live there or go to treatment. And again, you let them choose. And one of the moms, the kid said, "Yeah, I'll go live there." And he did. He lasted about a week and a half, and then he called his parents hysterical. "Please let me come home. I'll do anything. I'll do anything." And about a year later, I was at the State House advocating in front of the senators, and who's standing next to me but this young man? And he became an
Oh,
advocate for the state of New Hampshire. So it worked.
oh. So, but she didn't let him in the back in the house. Your option was the shelter or the treatment center.
Yeah, and he chose the shelter. And then I never found out after what happened. I'm assuming he probably went to treatment and then was allowed to come home. And he's
Okay.
doing well, married with children now, and living a healthy, happy life.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's
wow.
just, it's being open and honest, I think, which, because sometimes we're part of the problem, just an
Yeah.
FYI. My son would come home from treatment and I would remind him of the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars he owed us. I would remind him of the hurt he inflicted upon me. I would throw everything in his face. And that's not cool. So I was part of the
Mm.
problem. I had to learn to be part of the solution. And so his last treatment, a friend called and said, "Hey, I hear he's coming home tomorrow." And I started in, yeah, and he has to get a job and he has to do this and he has to do blah, 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 blah. I'm like, vomiting,
Vomiting.
right?
Yeah.
All this crap. And she said to me, "Donna, why don't you mind your own business and zip your lip for once in your life and do your own recovery program?" And I thought to myself, because I was,
First you're beepily beep beep beep, and then and then after we got over that shock, then what happened?
you got it. I didn't speak to her for like 5 years. But 5 years later, I called her to thank you for the gift she gave me
Oh,
because I did shut my mouth and I did find my own recovery program and I let him do his recovery the way he needed to do his recovery and I stopped trying to control it.
so the recovery program for you, tell us about that.
Well,
Righty.
I ended up, I went a little sideways. I tried Al Anon and I, I will tell you, it didn't work for me, but really I didn't work it. And that's what happens a lot with our loved ones when they go to treatment. Oh, it didn't work for me because you didn't work it.
Right.
And because in my mind, my child's not like your child. Give me the answer so I can just go home and we can live our lives and you go do your thing, and which was very wrong. Um,
You didn't
so
recognize your part of the problem.
yeah, well, many years later, it took a long time, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so from there, I started going to like meetup groups for spiritual people and learning how to meditate. And then I found Codependence Anonymous, and I loved it. And we read from Melody Beattie books and
Codependence
Anonymous.
anonymous. What does tell me more, what does that mean exactly? Codependence.
Codependent is when,
Give me an
kind of
example.
you, um, codependency is my life is defined by my son and his addiction, right? Or
Oh,
I need you in my life, or I need you as a crutch, or I'm gonna do everything for you because it makes me feel better.
I see. And how is that? That's how that almost sounds like, I know you don't like the word enabler, but here we go. Um, how is that different than Al-Anon?
Because they don't teach you to kick your loved one to the curb. They don't. It's not. It's
Mm,
about more unconditional love. That's how I interpreted it. I loved that you could talk about your feelings. So, like Al-Anon, you're given a book and you have to read that. You pass it around, and everybody you have to read the paragraph,
the
and
12
see if that
steps, yeah.
connects. And to me, that was controlling. Where Melody Beattie, the books were about codependency, and it really taught me. It opened up my eyes to my behaviors.
I love that. I can definitely see the difference because I Al-Anon is about supporting the addict when it's really about it's supposed to be about your uh position, your contribution, I suppose, to it. So that makes so much sense that Codependence Anonymous really focuses on your addiction to being that person. So it
Yeah,
really sounds like it's more about like they're not the problem, you're the problem.
yeah,
And because you're the problem, it's empowering you, giving you the control and helping you become the who you need to be so that you can be independent versus codependent on their story.
yeah,
Oh, I don't know. I'm that's just what I'm like, oh, I can see the value and how that can resonate with so many people who might have to go through on this journey or know somebody who does that if Al-Anon doesn't sit because it can be hard for a lot of folks like that
yeah.
and Codependence Anonymous it's like a growth self growth opportunity.
Yeah, I changed tremendously through that because I really looked at myself instead of
Yeah.
So what we do when we have a loved one or a child in active addiction, we
Mhm.
tend to be hyper focused on everything they're doing wrong. And we tend not to see the one little gleam of light that they're doing right.
Oh, so what focus on is what is all we see because that's all we're focused on.
Right. And I learned too, because my prayer used to be, I don't want my son to use drugs. Make my son stop doing drugs. I don't want him to be around drug dealers. And I kept getting more and more and more and more and more. And then what I realized, the universe doesn't understand the word don't. So I started to say, I
Right.
want my son to live a healthy, happy life. That was my prayer. And today my
Mm.
son is almost 17 years in recovery and living a happy, healthy life. He has his own business that him and his brother started. They're very successful. He votes. He gets to vote. You know, he owns multiple homes. And he has three beautiful little boys and a lovely wife. And he lives a clean, healthy life today.
Oh,
Those are
that's
the blessings.
fantastic.
And gifts do, believe it or not, gifts do come out of addiction,
Out of hardships.
out of
Yeah,
hardships. Yeah.
I believe that. Oh, goodness. Thank you for your story. This is such a great conversation.
Thank you for
So
having me.
you,
It was great.
yeah, so you wrote a book. It led you to writing a book.
I wrote four books. These are my most recent, my Sharing Without Shame and Healing Without Shame. And this is a journal that goes with this.
Oh, I
But,
love that. That word shame,
mm,
I think we talk about avoiding guilt, but shame,
bring you
like,
to your knees.
yeah, like there's a difference between guilt and shame.
hmm
Can you
hmm
share like
Well,
why
guilt.
that spoke to you? That's why you chose that as your, why did you choose that?
Well, some of it is the generation, the generations of shame that keep giving, right? Instead of
Right.
healing. Um, and when my son was in active addiction, there was so much shame that I felt. And it's just a powerful word. And guilt is a feeling like it's a feeling that I can control, right? That I can either allow myself to feel guilty or not feel guilty. But shame is just something that to me, just took over my whole body and just riddled with how do you move forward, right? And
Yeah.
when and you hear it come out sometimes when people talk, and someone brought it to my attention that I would say certain words and my voice would get really low. And that was my shame. I get real quiet, right? Because then you kind of shrivel up
Oh,
when you have shame.
what a blessing that you had people in your life that pointed some things out that for you. Maybe you didn't want to hear it at the time, but what a gift that is to have folks have a space where folks can be honest with you.
Yeah, because I wasn't honest with
That's
myself.
lovely.
And that woman that pissed me off, that told me I needed my own recovery and to zip my lip,
Yes.
I did call her and thank her for the gift.
Uh-huh.
Thank her for the gift because it was a gift that what she gave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Is there anything that I might have missed that you're like, we should have talked about
No,
that?
I think it's really important for everyone to know that there's no right or wrong way. We all have to find our way. What worked for me may not work for you, right? We have to find our way. Um, it's being kind and gentle, and it's really important for any parent or family member who is dealing with a loved one in active addiction to do self-care. Because what I learned too was, what if my son got well and I was toxic to his relations to him when he was sober, and he said to me, Mom, I love you, but I can't have you in my life because you're too sick. So that's
Mm.
why when I had that thought is when I put my roller skates on, because I was never not going to have my children in my life. And I wanted to be
Oh,
healthy for him and everybody else. And I'm a work in progress. I've been doing this for, I started my
Yeah.
recovery
We're
program.
all a work in progress. And what joy that, we don't like, how bored would we be if we didn't have anything to work on?
Yeah, yeah. And I started 2 years before he got sober. I started working on me and making better decisions and how I interacted with him. And so what I learned, and this is another thing that I teach, is how do you have a healthier relationship even when the person you love is unhealthy?
Oh, how?
Well, I'll give you an example. I had one mom, she was remarried, and it was an adult child who was homeless, and he wasn't allowed in the house, but she wanted to have him over for dinner, and so it was in the summer, and I said, did your husband say he couldn't come on your property? And she said no. And I said, you have a picnic table? She said yeah. I said, make dinner, bring it to the picnic table, break bread with him, and it's a win-win. And that's how she started having a healthier relationship with him, and she would give him food to take to wherever he was living in the woods. And I think 2 years of doing that, he ended up finding his way into recovery. They
Oh,
need to be
goodness.
loved more, not less.
Yeah.
Kicking them
Uh,
to the curb is not a good thing.
right.
It's figuring it out. How do you love them more without getting, in that toxicity and being part of the
The
drama triangle?
blame and
And
shame. Yeah.
yeah, because when we're pointing our fingers, the three fingers pointing back at us, so it's for us to take
Right.
responsibility. So,
And I love how you said gentle and kind.
mm, yeah,
Those
they're
are
already
like,
hurt.
mhm.
They're already hurting, because it really comes down to self-love or childhood trauma. We don't know because they're not facing it. But if we can plant seeds and have little conversations or give them, a healthy package to take into the woods that will keep them warm or fed, then that's loving them unconditionally. And that's what
Right.
they need. Because addiction is about disconnect. And how do we help them reconnect?
Yeah. I love that. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on today and just sharing your story, sharing your wisdom, and helping so many folks, so many parents, and
Thank you.
in turn helping their children make the world a better place.